This is Fantology.
You may have heard of us.
Okay, what's up, Alamancers? This is Steven, your host from Fantology, along with my lifelong friends, Ben and Josh, here to talk about Mistborn, the final empire. And after 180 episodes, or however many this is, by the time this comes out, we were finally doing some dedicated Mistborn content, which seems strange, to be honest.
Yeah, especially because I think for a lot of us, for at least for myself, I'll speak for myself, but Mistborn is like a pretty foundational thing that got me into fantasy. I mean, I had read Wheel of Time, like half of Wheel of Time and Kingkiller, but Mistborn is like what really made me like want to get into fantasy, if that makes sense. So I'm surprised we haven't talked about it more. I mean, we always reference it and we always reference Sanderson, but I'm happy
we were just biding our time, right, Ben?
Yeah, that's right. And similar for me, I mean, I think Mistborn might have, I know I read the first Wheel of Time book before Mistborn. I don't think I read Kingkiller before Mistborn, so this was definitely one of my first trips into fantasy.
Really? Well, I don't know about that because, okay, let me kind of think back to our the timeline here. So we were in college together. This is going to be a age reveal here. We were in college together in 2010 when Wise Man's Sphere came out. That was in early 2011, right? I think when Wise Man's Sphere came out. I remember going to get that book with you guys, but I don't think I read Mistborn until later in 2011. Had you already read it at that point?
See, I never read Name of the Wind until like 2013.
So you were just down for a midnight Walmart run.
I'm always down for a midnight Walmart. Yeah.
So we went to Walmart at midnight to try to find the Wise Man's Sphere. Turns out I don't think they had it. We had to like wait till the next day to get it. It was a total fail. But
unless you had a Nook.
I probably
unless you had a Nook, which obviously was going to beat out the Kindle in 2010. I mean, it was just dumb not to buy all of your books on the Nook platform.
Yeah, Ben and Josh were early adopters of the Nook, unfortunately. And how has that aged for you?
About as well as the Zune.
I don't even know what is that? I don't even know
the iPod competitor that Microsoft put out in like 2006 or whatever. Yeah.
Didn't even know that existed.
Yeah. I did not have one of those, but anyway.
Maybe somewhere out there, someone is still using a Nook and a
Nook to read their ebooks and a Zune to listen to their MP3 files.
Yeah, bless your soul, that poor person. All right, so Mistborn. So we all read it years ago, and now we're rereading it. And really, I think one of the strong motivating factors here is the Lost Metal that's coming out towards the end of the year, I think in November, and that's Mistborn number 7, the end of the second era of Mistborn books. And this is Mistborn number 1, the Final Empire. And I think we're planning on going through the entirety of like the Mistborn catalog through the rest of the year. That's a plan. I think we can kind of like guarantee like that's going to be a big focus for us. So to kind of get started, talking about this one, maybe we'll say like from, reflecting on, because I think we've all kind of had a time gap from the time we first read it. And then we read a bunch of other fantasy stuff and now we're rereading it. Like what stood out to you guys?
So a few things. Like I think I reference this every time I talk about Mistborn. I've yet to read a book that does as good of a job as a standalone book and as an introduction to the rest of the trilogy, right? Like that's one of the reasons why recommending Mistborn is so easy for me, is because I'm like, hey, read this book. If you don't like it, you don't have to continue on. You'll get like a self-contained story. And if you did love it, then there's a whole lot more where that came from. Right. And I really can't think of another book that does it that well. We interviewed Richard Swan, and he just wrote a book and it does a similar thing. And that's called The Justice of Kings. Mm-hmm. And it is also a self-contained story that also hints at like the fact that there's like all this stuff underneath the surface. But I would say those two books are really the only two kind of start of trilogies or start of series that can do that super well.
I'm trying to come up with a rebuttal just for sake of argument, and I don't know if I have one.
Yeah, like all like all of Joel Abercrombie's his first books in both of his series are good, but they definitely set up the rest of the series and aren't as self-contained as like the first Mistborn book is. Mark Lawrence, kind of the same thing. I mean, I haven't read all of his trilogies, but the Broken Empire and the Red Sister, or the I'm forgetting the name of that series, but they were both good. But
Book of the Ancestor,
Book of the Ancestor, yeah, they were both good starts, like really good starts, but they didn't. I think that they weren't as self-contained as the first Mistborn.
You might make an argument that like series that are more like for example, Dresden is more like, I don't know, kind of like a TV show.
It's more serial.
It's serial,
It's kind
but
of more
again,
serialized,
that's maybe a better self-contained book, but it's not doing as much to set up the rest of the series either.
Sure. Yeah,
like it's not
that's true.
introducing all that many plot lines that are going to really carry through the rest of the series.
Yeah,
like Mistborn does.
I could see that. I mean, the first Dresden book does do a lot of heavy lifting, and like there are elements that are still seen, but I do agree that it doesn't carry as much weight on its shoulders than the first Mistborn book does, and it doesn't have nearly as satisfying of an end.
Mm-hmm. So. And I mean, Sanderson purposely didn't like load in everything for the trilogy, and where are we setting spoiler levels at? We'll say, plot up.
So I'd say if you haven't, full Fantology recommend for Mistborn. If you haven't read it, go read it. And we're going to start spoilers. Do you want to do for the whole series? I think we should just do the whole series, at least Era 1.
Era 1.
Do you want it?
Full Era 1.
Well, if we're going to talk about like the impacts that the first book has on how many listeners do you think have read the first book but haven't read the second and third? That are really
like it's been out for like what, 15 years now? I can't remember the publication date.
I also agree with that. We'll keep it to just Mistborn. We won't spoil Era 2, and we won't spoil crossovers like that happen in other parts of the Cosmere.
Other Cosmere stuff, sure.
Yeah, but we'll talk.
Yeah, that's a really important thing. Like, we're not going to spoil the big thing that know. If
you've read other Cosmere, you know what we're talking about. We won't spoil that.
Yeah, okay. We're not going to go into that.
Okay.
So through the first, I think Sanderson's talked about this. He said through the first book, he focused on allomancy. Second book focused on Feruchemy. I can never say that. And then the third book was hemorrhagy. And so I think he does a good job of, slowly building, right? And then into Era 2, he kind of like twists it around with different combinations and stuff. So I think that's a smart way to do it, where he's able to get this self-contained story where there's this entirely new thing and it makes a lot of sense, but then can keep the momentum of the trilogy going by then like continuing to introduce more and more and making it more magical, keeping, fresh elements into the plot, not letting it get too stale. It's a really good way to do a trilogy.
And Sanderson does a lot of world building through magic and explores a lot of the world through magic. But I think that what Mistborn excels at, and especially Mistborn Era 1, is really helping you understand how magic connects to the story and how, and like I said, the world building through magic with still having it seem pretty natural. Like Sanderson excels and has only gotten better at really having you picture what the magic is doing, at least in my mind. Like, and I know it's like some of it, like pushing and pulling on metals, like that's pretty straightforward. But even like with emotional allomancy, like he does a good job on kind of defining what that can and can't do. And like kind of in Star Wars, the opposite of the spectrum, which he specifically said he was trying to make it a little bit harder magic than like Star Wars. Like it's literally just a hand wave. And then like you can control somebody's mind. Whereas like emotional allomancy is like, let me pull on their, anger and reduce their suspicion and like da-da-da-da-da. And kind of, you really understand what the emotional allomancer is doing. And so all of this just does really good world building. And also even he manages to really build Kelsier's character and Vin's character through teaching us about the magic and teaching us about like, anyway, I'm kind of rambling here. But I really like how he incorporates magic into world building and character development is my overall thesis for that rant.
On the flip side, I feel like through this book, it can be a little boring, or just it gets a little stale when it's like, okay, like Vin is gonna go with the next crew member and like learn, the next magic thing and like level up a little bit more. And like this is just kind of this continual thing throughout the book. And like, yes, it introduces you to more like side characters, but at the same time, does it become a little formulaic in the way that it's structured?
Yeah, I agree with that. It almost feels like this would be better done in like an Ocean's 11 montage, right? Where they're like introducing you to all the characters and which again, Mistborn, like Sanderson always says, it's like he loves heists. And so he was like combining, like a heist was a major, at least for the first book, like a major inspiration. So it was like, we're going to go through and meet all of the team's special, like, assets, and they're going to teach Finn how to do it. So I don't know. It's tough because I do think that it's necessary to watch Vin grow, but I do also see your point about it being formulaic, watching that happen.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you're wrong, but I think that that's something you're going to notice a lot more on your second read through, because you already know what heights Vin does reach by the ending of the first book. But during most of the first book, you have hints that she's strong, but it's not. But you need, in my opinion, those moments where she's learning help demonstrate like her power. When she, later on in the book, the fact like, oh, you barely saw her like learn how to control this or that, and then by the end of the book, she's like, just a total like BA flying through the air, slaying people.
Yeah. And I do think also, like, I appreciate the fact that it wasn't just Kelsier that teaches her everything, because that would have been even more annoying. It would have been like Kelsier goes out on another rooftop and teaches her how to riot people. Like that would have been.
Well, and it hints that Kelsier isn't even that great at emotional elemency. Like he's really good at pushing and pulling. Like that's what makes him dangerous, and that's what makes him like, that's where he's at. Whereas with the other metals, like he kind of just disregards gold, like he just says like it's worthless. Whereas like I don't think Vin would ever just look at a metal and say, oh, that's worthless, right? Like even if the worth isn't immediately apparent.
Yeah, Kelsier was much more goal oriented. Like he was using Allomancy as a means to an end, whereas like Vin, I feel like, wanted to understand Allomancy because that was like a core aspect of her identity.
Yeah, and towards the end, she's like, towards the end when she is locked up, I think with Sazed, and she realizes that the metal table that she had in her mind like wasn't complete. Like in the midst of everything that's happening, she's like, wait a second, this doesn't match up right. Like there should be a different alloy here that we don't even know about. It's like, yeah, I guess it kind of like shows you how much she is interested in like the science behind it.
But also, is that really realistic, or is that just like Sanderson needing to insert like,
yeah, he's needing to like
lore
info dumping,
right?
Yeah,
I don't think it's unrealistic. I mean, if I was in that situation, I might. I don't know if that came to mind, I would definitely dwell on it because it might be important, and like the secrets of Allomancy were important in actually.
And they are
winning
looking for like the
end.
11th metal, or like
yeah. I would say so. Another thing that stuck out to me on my reread, and again, this is really only possible on a reread, is just how well the twists were set up throughout. And even some of the twists that are going to happen later on, like with her earring, which is a big thing towards the end, right? That was just set up like just enough where it stood out a few times where it's like, why are we mentioning the earring right now? But if you've read it, then you know that it's important. And so like, okay, that's not just like a throwaway line. It actually means something. It makes me want to reread Stormlight really carefully and like focus on every single thing that he says. Like, okay, like this, the secrets are buried in here somewhere. And it probably is possible to figure out because he plots these things out incessantly. But did you guys have a similar experience and how things were set up?
Yeah, I mean, for me it was what's her brother's name talking to her the whole time? Rin.
Reen.
Reen.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. like kind of how he's just like whispering to her, and that obviously that is connected to the earring, but
Yeah.
that was awesome. And how that's not even like the Lord Ruler, that's like the long game. So
Hmm.
that was cool.
I think similar. I think it was really cool how you get the prophecy, the logbook, right? And at the ending of the logbook, how all of those prophecies are also referring to who the hero of ages ends up being, right?
Right.
I guess I'm just trying to keep it general enough to not ruin things for completely for people that are still listening. Be better, spoiler warning.
Yeah.
But how that, so all those prophecies work for the twist at the end, but they also work for the twist at the ending of this book, that like you needed to know that Furukumi was important for how the Lord Ruler was doing his powers, but they still work for the ending, for the big twist at the end of the whole series. Like it's pretty amazing to watch him tie both of those things together.
Yeah. And then you also have like the Kelsier twist, right? Where like that's the big twist for the end of this book, where Kelsier pretty much knew that he wasn't going to survive this. He knew like he was setting up for his team, like kind of training them to be able to take over and run the city when he was gone, and leaving like these stashes all over the place of like weapons to give to the Ska. Like that was super cool. And
even just the introduction of the Khandra, and you're like, at the beginning, I don't know if I thought this on my first read through, but you could just be like, why do they really need a Khandra to pretend to be this like this
like this, you really know hire like this like mythical being to pretend to be somebody when you're all pretending to be somebody?
Yeah, right. Like you think you could have just gotten another member of the crew to pretend to be, but they got a Khandra. So throughout the book, if you were paying attention, you would have been like, the Khandra's got to be doing something else. And then, but if you're just like reading it, you're like, oh, okay, this is just a way that they're introducing Khandras, I guess. I don't know, but it worked really well.
Yeah. Sometimes authors will take the strategy of, with their twists, the way that they embed them is like someone will say something kind of out there a little bit, and then they'll be like, oh, well, I can't tell you right now, or something really obvious where you as the reader are like, oh, okay, that whatever he said there, like that is obviously important, and then you just like mark it in your head, and then it becomes kind of obvious when it's revealed. You're like, oh, okay, that's what that meant, right? Yeah. But at least in Mistborn, Sanderson really doesn't do that. Like everything really does play a role, and it's like really nicely tied together. So I like, if I'm gonna say, I think the twists throughout Mistborn, throughout the first trilogy and in this book as well, like I think that's the strongest element, and he does this in his other books too. So his ability to just like embed these things, and then they're important, and it becomes like this inevitable thing that is also surprising and pays off like that. That's really masterfully done. I think if there's one thing Sanderson does well, I mean, world building obviously, but also the way that he does this is awesome.
Yeah, and the fact that like the world building ties into it, like even like the ash mounts, it's not just a cool setting. It's like those ash mounts exist because the Lord Ruler screwed up and put it too close to the sun or whatever, and then he had to like correct with the ash mounts. Like there, and the mist wraiths, like there's this cool like amorphous blobs that are just kind of out there, and the Ska are kind of afraid of them, and then they turn out to be, like there's just so many cool things that happen that that are not even essential parts of the story for a long time, but are just really cool to imagine and end up being super important.
And Sazed and the religions, like it's cool to hear someone talk about all the lore of everything, but also like that's really important at the end with the hero of ages that Josh
exactly
was referring to. Right. Yeah, exactly.
And I love too, like, so just like the sappy parts of it. Like I can't remember the last time I cried during a book. Well, I can. The last time I cried during the book was on my reread last year, when Kelsier left the note for Vin with the flower in it, and like said that you're the daughter that we never had. Like that just got me, man. I don't know. Did that get any of you, like either of you guys the same way? It was just like, oof. So
I don't know if they're actual tears, but certainly emotions.
It was tender.
Yeah.
I was also on a bike ride when I listened to that part, so I was probably like already emotionally fragile. but it was just like very tender. And he just hit those emotional beats super well throughout it.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that stood out to me, and this is, I don't know if this is changing subject too much, but after reading it my first time, people would talk about how it's kind of YA, like young adult, and I've never understood that, but now I kind of understand it. Like on my second read through, especially after having read so many other fantasy works, I'm kind of like, I can see why people think that Mistborn is more on like the young adult spectrum of fantasy.
Mhm.
So, okay, Josh, then why did you, so why do you think it's YA? Is it just the romance aspect or is there other things?
So the romance aspect was a kind of big part about why it was YA, but also just Vin as a character felt more like a YA character in some senses. Like it was her introduction to the world in a lot of ways. Like, she knew a really rough world, right? Which, so I'm not trying to like discount Vin or anything, but like
Mhm.
a lot of YA books take the kind of stance of like introducing the main character to the rest of the world and learning how they fit into the world is a big theme in a lot of the young adult books I've read. And that was a really big theme. And this book was taking Vin, and is she going to fit into the high society? Is she going to fit into the crew? Is she going to fit into like, just be in a relationship with Alan? Like all these things are her finding out who she is. And so,
Okay.
and that just thematically, it seemed like a YA book, along with the fact that Sanderson doesn't really swear, like the violence isn't too gratuitous, and so
Kind
combined
of
with all the,
dystopian.
a little, yeah, a bit dystopian,
Okay.
you're
Okay.
on the edge of a revolution type thing. So I don't know, like just I can see, I still wouldn't put it as a YA book myself, but now I don't think I'm going to argue with people that say it's YA, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Like I think there's enough good reasons why you would classify it as a YA book.
Do you think Name of the Wind is YA?
No.
Why then?
It's similar
Because
coming of age story. Similar.
yeah, it sounds like everything that you just described, I could also say was Name of the Wind.
Yeah, I think the simplicity with which Sanderson writes and the accessibility with which he writes also plays into that YA factor. I think that Sanderson writes in a very simple way that you can accessible way that a lot of people can get their heads around, whereas Rothfuss really doesn't. Rothfuss's writing is a lot more steeped in metaphor and like simile and allegory, and the there's time jumps and like
Okay.
there's perspective shifts and just the character development. Yes, it is a coming of age story, but I think that there's enough of those other kind of storytelling techniques interspersed throughout Kingkiller that are absent
Yeah.
from Mistborn that would make me way more hesitant to classify it as a young adult book.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. As you were saying that, I was thinking there's this one passage in Name of the Wind, no spoilers here, but he talks about like entering different doors in his mind in order to like close off different things that are happening, and just like this whole like long metaphor that he then comes back to like several times throughout the book. And like, yeah, that type of writing, you don't see that in Mistborn. Sanderson just doesn't really mess around with that type of thing.
And by the way, just so we don't get hate comments, this isn't me saying that like YA is inferior or whatever to like the rest of adult fantasy. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just like classifying my experiences with reading YA books. These are different things that I see that make it feel YA versus not feel YA. And I'm sure there's plenty of YA books that have great allegory and simile and metaphors and stuff, but just that's why I said that. Yeah.
And a lot of people just get angry whenever we have a conversation about classifying because it really is kind of pointless. So,
I guess everyone's kind of got a different spectrum on these types of things. So yeah, but publishers have to classify them somewhere. So maybe not totally pointless.
So how does so I think again, one of the awesome parts of this was how it like created a world that Sanderson is still writing in, and how he had magic systems that were like limber enough to tell a lot of different stories. Um, like, I mean, did you predict that when you're reading the Mistborn book for the first time? Like, did you see how these powers would like interplay with each other? And like, that's also a pretty cool twist, you know?
You mean like all the way through to Era 2, or
Yeah, even
just
like into Era 2, like not a lot of spoilers there, but like I mean that's what's crazy to me. Like everybody that finished up reading Era 1, and then you're just like, wow, this is crazy. Like there's, you know, like so much more to like what could happen when you have these types of powers together, you know?
this type of, I mean, no, I did not predict that in my first read through. I probably had no idea what I was even getting into back then with epic fantasy. But this type of thing does make me think, because when I read other series, other authors, they come up with these whole different worlds and such, and sometimes it's just like for a shorter series or even just a one-off novel. And I think, man, like they went through all this effort to build this whole world and all this unique stuff, and they're just gonna write one book. Like that just doesn't make sense. Sanderson's very economical with his creation of worlds.
I think economical is I don't know how I would never describe Sanderson as economical. He just writes so many different things.
Well,
I mean, he uses them well, but
he optimizes the heck out of the stuff he produces. Look at what Dragonsteel is doing right now with their Kickstarter and everything. Like I'm not going to say he's milking it, because he produces a lot of quality stuff, but he does a good job of taking what he has created in his head and getting it out there into like a bunch of different platforms and forms, and including different variations of the same world in different books.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. I do think though that like he wrote it in a way that I could spin off a lot of things pretty organically. Like you're not seeing him like kind of try and milk Mistborn in a way that feels milky. You know what I mean? Like
we stop using the word milky.
Sorry. He's not trying to squeeze Mistborn.
He's not trying to.
Mistborn is not undulating as much as normal. I don't know. That was a stretch.
Yeah. There's no. Okay.
Do you get my point though? Like he's not. It doesn't like.
Yeah.
There's some series that you're like, okay, you can just stop writing this world right now. Like, you know.
Don't say anything. You're gonna offend people.
Josh is like, we're no Rothfuses here with our use of simile.
Yeah, we can't. Yeah,
no, just no.
Just no.
Yeah, I think especially going into Era 2, I like how he doesn't have to retcon things. He just continues to build off of it, and then he's like, okay, now some things have changed. Therefore, what might happen down the line with different types of powers and forms, and I think we'll see the same thing with Mistborn Era 3, and probably the same thing in the second half of Stormlight Archive.
So this is one thing I wanted to ask about, and I don't want to, like, I know people might be trying to avoid spoilers for later on in the Cosmere, so I'll try and ask this in a roundabout way. But do you think that like the way that Sanderson has kind of primed his audience for those that are paying attention, I think will make them accept changes that are going to happen in a way that might not have been able to happen if he didn't have such a like clued in fan base. You know what I mean? Like if you pick up, I'm assuming like, even if you picked up Era 2 after Era 1, you're like, a lot of people don't like those changes, right? Because they feel so like, like they feel pretty disjointed. I feel like that's only going to get worse if you don't like it. But like, because he's said for years and kind of made known what his plan is, like I feel like that will end up helping him.
You think like, people wouldn't like combinations of magics and things like that?
I think more just like the massive technological changes that I think will, because he is kind of navigating two different genres, right? Like yeah, they're going to switch genres.
He has a steampunk,
like
Mistborn was more of kind of classic medieval type turn of the like pre-industrial revolution, then steampunk. Next is going to be more sci-fi. So this is kind of related to that, Ben, what you're saying with Sanderson. I feel like Sanderson has his work, and hearing people, okay, hear me out. hearing people talk about Lord of the Rings, I've heard so many people refer to like the books and like the lore and the appendices as like sacred. Like, I don't think Sanderson views his own works as like sacred. Like, I think if a change needs to be made, kind of like he did with the ending of Words of Radiance, like he just made a pretty big change, you know. And I'm sure if he needs to go back and tweak something in the lore or whatever, like he would just do it and just be like, okay, this is what needs to work for the story moving forward. I'm sorry that like I didn't have it planned out 20 years ago when I wrote the first Mistborn book or whatever. Like, and I think he's been open enough with fans that they would be accepting of it, like you're saying, Ben.
I don't know if he would straight up change something. I mean, maybe he might like tweak the interpretation or introduce a new way of thinking through things. I don't think he's gonna.
Well, so I was listening to, and I don't want to get this wrong because I was listening to 17th Shard talk about the Words of Brandon that he did in this spoiler stream for the first secret project that he did. And so they were talking about like Aether and how his like kind of interpretation, and this isn't published, so it's not really a change to canon, but he's kind of between like Aether of the Night and the first secret project. He's kind of changed how they interact. And again, Aether of the Night wasn't published, so it's not like official Cosmere canon, but I think that his way of thinking about it and his like view of the magic has changed, you know, since he's written that. So I think we could see that in another 20 years, you know, of him writing stuff, that he'll need to update some things for it all to work together. But that's just
I would be surprised to see him completely like retcon things. I think he would just introduce changes as like, okay, these things like now they're working together and here's how it works type of thing. Yeah,
like I don't think he's ever gonna be like, actually, like what's the metal that helps you see the future?
ATM.
Actually, ATM doesn't really have you see the future or see, like, it actually just, you know, gives people a better sense of probability. Like, I don't think he's gonna do stuff like that, like change fundamental things, but I could see him being like, actually, you know, like the rate at which Mistborn burn metal or whatever is like changed. Or, I don't know. Just I could see him changing. This is a big tangent. Right. But my whole point is that like I don't think he sees his works as infallible, and he's going to put the story first, you know, and write good stories instead of just like developing a mythology like Tolkien did, if that makes sense.
I wonder if any authors see their works as infallible when they first published. I would kind of be surprised, honestly. Like, you'd have to be pretty arrogant. Like, you'd have to like kind of think a lot of your work.
But fans like
as years pass, fans
see their work as infallible.
Yeah,
and I definitely, there's some authors that are much more like perfectionistic. Like Rothfuss is a lot. I guarantee you, he's going to like a lot less likely to change something about Kingkiller than like Sanderson would be about Mistborn. You know, he's going to be much more perfectionist about it.
Yeah. I would. I mean, I think at this point we would have to assume that. Yes,
we'd hope that.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So we just have a few minutes remaining. Should we do our? If you have any more thoughts, why don't you try to wrap them into the worst of the best segment? Yeah.
Deal.
Okay. So here we're going to talk about one element from the book that we liked, but there was like one thing that was kind of weird about it that we didn't like as much. So the worst part of the best parts, and Ben is ready to go now.
Yeah. So spook speak. So the old language spoken by spook. I've never been able to figure it out. Like, I never know how to interpret it.
It's like, is it Pig Latin? What is it?
Right. And maybe it's because like normally I listen to it on 2x speed. I'm just like not going to go back and like really think about it. But I have read it anyway. It's just like one of those quirky things that I don't think added anything to the story, and that annoys me every time I read it because I want to understand it and I can't get myself to. I understand like it'll hit differently for other people and other people will probably like it, but that's the worst of the best for me. It's probably best because of how it ended up in era 2. Like being like the like
High society language.
yeah, not even high society, like the sacred, like kind of like how
Yeah.
we talk about like Bible, like thee, thou, thy, like
Uh-huh.
it becomes like kind of a higher speech. But
Yeah.
anyway, um worst of the best for me because I still don't understand it and it is annoying to me whenever it pops up. But I also like love that it's in there. So
Hot take for me, I know this might be unpopular, but nowadays, anytime I read a book where there are magical words that are not like that are just made up by the author, I just skip over them and say insert magic word here. Like I don't even try to sound it out. It's just like, what am I getting out of this magic
so like even like
incantation?
well okay, but like what about like yeah, like Mistborn, like you wouldn't take time to think about like Allomancy, like
Well, no, I mean like a magic spell or like anytime
oh,
someone
okay.
says something that's just like completely nonsensical,
Like
made up,
italicized.
yeah, italicized, yes.
Anytime you see italics, you're like, okay, just
Yeah, italicized.
Yeah.
Okay, magic happens. Skip. Like, why even? It seems like that takes a lot of effort to write that out. So why even do it if you're an author? Why not just say like, she said
Yeah,
the magic words? I don't.
I could get that, but like a little
because I think a lot of
more,
people like
come
it,
on.
Stephen.
Well, I don't like it.
I don't know. Like, can you imagine Harry Potter without the spells?
Yeah, but those spells are like 2 words max. Like there's none that are too long.
That's fair.
And they're all basically just Latin words with like,
Yeah.
yeah,
and
Yeah,
I suppose that like the vast majority came in the first few books. Like, you're not getting any more like
yeah. How many spells do you learn? Yeah, there's like one spell per book that somehow saves the day.
and some of
that's
this, like you say, they're Latin. So like petrificus. Oh gosh, yeah, that's why you don't say
locales.
spells.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know the body bind spell.
Petra,
Yeah. Yeah, listen to Emma Watson say it. Yeah, so you can actually see like, okay, like total petrification, like that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that was that your worst of the best? I feel like that wasn't even in the book. Really.
That's Steven's worst of the best for
no,
fantasy
that
genre.
wasn't mine. I was
Oh.
just
That was just a tangent.
I was piggybacking off Ben, so I liked his.
Okay. All right. Well, my worst of the best. This is a hot take, an actual hot take. The first time reading through Kelsier's death scene, it like blew me away. The second time reading through Kelsier's death scene, it was kind of underwhelming. Like I feel like they just like started fighting and then he died. Like I don't know.
I feel like that was the point of like
that was not the point.
Yeah, it just seems so much more. I just remembered it being so much more epic. Like,
well, the epic part was with the Inquisitor, like him flying through the air and like taking on this like
just totally wrecking the Inquisitor and decapitating him. That was awesome. I don't know. I mean, it had been 10 years since I'd read it, but it just kind of, I get that Kelsier never stood a chance against the Lord Ruler, and that's what it. Just in my head, it was more cinematic than it ended up being in the book. So again, I get that's a hot take. Like him fighting the Inquisitor was like one of the best scenes, but then immediately just like laying on the ground and getting a spear like stabbed through him was pretty rough.
Just the backhanded slap was what gets me every time.
Yeah, just tore away like half his face. Yeah. Ugh. It's like
it still does a good job of giving you that like impending sense of doom. And then the like the no type of feeling as you read through it.
It does. Yeah, it does. It does a good job, but it used to be like one. I don't know. It's just one of those things I think I remember. Like my memory of it was way bigger than the actual scene itself. If that makes sense.
It's unfortunate that he couldn't come up with a way to make it more obvious that Kelsier was trying to use the 11th metal. And it like did something, but it wasn't effective type of thing. Because you don't see anything. Kelsier just kind of like stands there.
Like even just see like his face drooped in disappointment or something like that,
Yeah. Or he like says something, he's like, oh no, it couldn't be like, I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
Or like, who are you even? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, like realizing, something like that. You're right. Yeah.
All right. We talked about this already, but just my worst of the best is still the crew, because the crew is fun and it's a heist, but I never really could separate the side characters super well. They all just kind of have like one or two things that makes them stand out. And I think the reason why, I was thinking about why this was, I think the reason why is they don't really have anything that, I mean, this isn't entirely true, but for the most part, they just kind of exist to further the Vin and Kelsier plot along. Like, they don't have a ton that they're doing on their own, so they don't seem like autonomous characters. They just kind of seem like pieces in the board, and that made for a little bit of an unsatisfying reading experience with the side characters for me.
They do get a lot better in the second too, if I remember right. But
they do. Speaking about Josh's like retconning or like changing canon, Sanderson has said that he'll, like, if there's ever a movie made, that he'll make Demoy. Is it Demoy? Demoy. Like, he'll make him a girl.
Is that no? I thought I didn't think it was him. I thought it was thought it was Ham or Breeze or
Maybe
one of the crew members.
Okay, I was looking at Sevens and Shard and they listed him as being the one, but maybe it's something. Anyway, I know that he talked about like the fact that like he really wanted to like be progressive in the way that he like displayed strong female empowerment, but like, and so he made Vin, and then he like made everybody else male, and so that's one thing that he like regretted doing. And so it is nice that he is able to like look at himself and make that change for when it does hopefully eventually be made into like cinematic.
Okay, last thing, do you guys think it'd be better as a video game or TV show / movie?
I don't play video games, so I wouldn't.
But just imagine, like there's all these cool magic powers that you can do.
We played as Kelsier in Fortnite, so I'm not big into video games. It would be a cool video game. It would be like a sweet Spider-Man game. I know.
Yeah, the thing is, there like Spider-Man. You also have like the Star Wars games. Like, I feel like could accomplish similar feels. Like, I feel like the thing that makes Mistborn so awesome is the narrative around it. Like, it does have cool magic, and I know video games can do cool stuff with narratives.
Yeah, video games have stories nowadays, Ben. It's not.
I know. Okay, I corrected myself, but still, like, I don't know.
Ben just mashes the next button whenever he gets to the in-game book or whatever.
Right. Cutscene boring, skip.
What if you just get to the end of the game and there's no way for you to defeat the Lord Ruler? You just die as Kelsier every time.
Every time you just die. That would be depressing.
From what I've heard about Elden Ring, it sounds like that's the end of Elden Ring.
Okay. Yeah. I think, to answer your question, Stephen, I think if there is anything that could be movies made into a movie over a TV show, it's Mistborn. I think that they could
video game over a TV show.
No, I'm saying TV show over movie, or movie over TV show. I think almost everything else you would have to go, TV show just to get the runtime that you would need. But I think that each Mistborn book could work well as a movie. Like, you could fit everything in.
Yeah,
like I said, half of this book could have been a montage.
Yeah. All right. Okay, that's our rapid fire coverage of Mistborn, and keep on watching our channel for more coverage to the rest of the Mistborn era 1 and era 2 up until the Lost Metal. One of our goals this year is to get an arc for the Lost Metal, so we'll see if that happens. So if you are watching Dragonsteel, hook us up.
Please somebody be watching.
All right, thanks guys. See you later.
Thanks, Steven. Bye.